And we're live. Welcome to Music Matters with Jason Tramm. We're so delighted you can join us for our unique podcast community where we explore the issues and challenges in the musical and artistic world in these crazy and troubling times. But we look at innovation and we look at great artists and how they're dealing with these things. And we take it apart and we just have these discussions. Feel free to chat with us and ask some questions of the artists. You are welcome to join us. We love it when our audience chimes in and has questions. So hit that chat. Please subscribe to us on YouTube and hit that bell icon for the most up-to-date information on upcoming guests and topics. Like and share our videos on social media. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all those type of social media platforms. And we're delighted you can join us. We have a wonderful guest today. We have an internationally acclaimed conductor, Diane Wittry, a veteran who's been in the music business for a while and doing incredible work. She has conducted in over 11 countries, including China, Poland, Canada, Bosnia, Russia, and so on, and is very active in the United States, having guest conducted some of the major orchestral ensembles in this country for like the LA Philharmonic, the Buffalo Philharmonic, Florida Philharmonic, and many, many others. She's currently music director of the Allentown Symphony Orchestra in Pennsylvania and the Garden State Philharmonic in New Jersey. She's written books on conducting and by Oxford University Publishing, and we are delighted that she's with us. Welcome, Diane.
Thank you. Thank you. It's great to be here, Jason.
So happy you can spend the time with us today. You've had such a dynamic career and you do so many things really well. So thank you so much for joining us on Music Matters.
Great, great. You know, it's interesting this time we're living in.
It certainly is a unique time, and that we're all, as artists, doing things we never thought we'd be doing and going in directions we never thought we had. What are you doing these days? With the changes and COVID has caused in all of our lives?
Yeah, you know, when this all hit, we all thought it was going to be, I know I was told 2 weeks at home, right? And as things developed, so the first 2 weeks, we all got really involved in doing all those projects, those little projects we hadn't done. So, you know, I worked on some composing and rewrote a piece of mine. And then as it went longer, I think many of us, we started doing interviews and things on Zoom, and we started recreating ourselves in a new way of how do we reach people, because none of us have done any concerts where we've actually conducted. You know, we're conductors, you're a conductor, and yet now our jobs are more music curator, you know, working with creating concerts of either virtual presentations or something live streamed. It's just a totally different world.
We become like television producers in a very strange and sort of way.
Yes, exactly. And I think my challenge was, you know, how do you stay connected and motivated during this time when you're sitting at home in front of a computer? You know, and you can go and sit in front of your piano and you can go and work, but it was hard being so isolated, because to me, music is a shared experience. And I get so much joy from sharing the music as opposed to just me and the music. And I think most conductors are that way. We love working with people, and this has been very challenging for us in that regard.
Yeah, it's so sad. We're all missing our artistic communities. We're missing the players in the orchestra and the singers, and it's out the better.
Yes, definitely. But you know, there were some really fun things that happened because of this, I have to say. So in Allentown, we have a new, so by jumping on this opportunity, I felt that we were able to offer a workshop that was actually better than what we originally conceptualized. It just we had to change our thinking.
Yeah, it's amazing
how that's happened in a lot of aspects.
We've removed the geographical limitations of anything, and it's open to really the world.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, an interesting thing is Allentown Symphony, we're creating a virtual ball. And we could go back to some of our guest artists who normally would never be able to perform at our ball, and we asked them to submit some performances. And so once again, it's challenging us to think differently, but it can be very exciting.
Well, you're certainly an innovator in the field and have been doing that for many years. Tell us about how you started in music. Did you always know you wanted to be a musician? And how about a conductor? Did you always know you wanted to be a conductor as well?
Yeah. No, I actually didn't. I discovered conducting late in life or later. I was a violinist, and even that early on was not my choice. My mother basically told all of us, there were 5 kids, that we were going to play violin, and that was that. But I grew to love it, and there was a real turning point. I actually grew up studying Suzuki violin, and we happened to live in Japan for 6 months. And I was about 13, and I worked directly with Dr. Suzuki. And that was a real turning point in my life, working with him. And I suddenly got really inspired to practice more. And then I think the other turning point was when I was in college. I was majoring as a violinist, and I discovered conducting purely by accident. In fact, a conducting course was required for me to take before I graduated, and I just fell in love with it. And then I would say the third turning point was when Daniel Lewis accepted me into the master's program, which was a very competitive program, and they only took 4 people a year. And that was, sometimes you need someone else to believe in you before you believe in yourself. And that was really what I needed to be able to say, okay, I'm going to go and do this full time. And then ever since then, I never looked back. I just pursued the conducting after that. And then the composing and the writing really came later in life, as I was looking for more ways of having outlets. And also, I think I started thinking about Copland and Bernstein and even Berlioz going back, and how so many of the great musical minds were very diversified, that they didn't just do one thing. They performed, they conducted, they wrote articles, and they wrote music. And I decided I wanted to be that type of musician.
How do you organize your schedule? You do so many different things. How do you keep your deadlines straight, and your conducting engagements and your composition life? How do you balance all those things?
That's a very good question. And balance is a difficult thing. I would say that the compositions and the book writing gets kind of put aside, and that happens in what we call the lull times, which is sometimes you can grab a couple weeks in the summer. Sometimes you can grab some time between, Christmas and New Year's is always a lull time when you don't have a lot of concerts. So it's kind of like, if you have concerts, you focus on that, but then you try to block out some weeks. Mahler did the same thing. Mahler really only composed in the summers. He would block out some time, go to his house by the lake and compose. And that's what I try to do. I'm the type of composer that when I'm writing a piece, I kind of live the piece. I emotionally become the piece. And so I really like it if I have like a week of time that I can just dive into that and just immerse myself. I hate it when I'm trying to write and then I have to go do something else. It makes it just very difficult for me. I can edit that way, I can fine tune, but the actual creative process, I have to really become the piece. Emotionally, it's an interesting process for me.
We've had a lot of composers on. It's always interesting to hear a composer's perspective on how they find inspiration. And how do you find inspiration for the pieces you're writing? Are they written for specific concerts that you're planning, or are they kind of abstract? Or how do you find that type of inspiration?
Yeah, usually I just get an idea for a piece and I begin to hear it in my head. So a lot of my music, and I don't have that many pieces. I'm what you call a baby composer. And I only write for orchestra, which is unusual. So my very first piece, I wrote a full orchestra piece, 16 minutes long. That was the absolute first piece I ever wrote in my whole life. But I heard it in my head. And so for me, it comes through me and then onto the paper. And so I hear it in my head, actually usually in full orchestral sound. And then I just have to fine tune it and put it down and make sure and what's interesting is when I try to manipulate it, it becomes very stifled. So, and that's why I feel I need the time to be very relaxed and not rushed and let it just flow through me. And then usually afterwards I look at it and I go like, I can't believe I wrote this. I don't know how I wrote this. I have no idea where it came from. It's very odd. But I will tell you, and this for any composers listening out there, I was very afraid to compose, 3/4 of my life, thought I had nothing to say. And then I started thinking about John Cage. And if you're familiar with John Cage, John Cage broke all the rules. And so therefore, as a composer, I figured I didn't have to worry about whether I knew the right rules or I followed the right rules, because if I followed John Cage's example, there were no rules. So therefore, there was no way I could possibly be wrong ever. And so that gave me the freedom then to just write what I felt or what I heard in my head and just not worry about anything else.
That's fantastic. How many pieces have you written to date?
Just 7. But at least all my pieces have been premiered and performed and recorded, so it's kind of exciting.
Now let's go back to the end of your training as you finished your master's degree and you started. What are some of the lessons your teachers, you've studied with some great teachers, reading your biography, from Michael Tilson Thomas to so many of Gustav Meyer and all these luminaries in the field. What are some things that you took away from the great teachers that have stuck with you for the rest of your career?
Yeah, so I studied with a lot of people, and I participated in master classes around the world, and was fascinated by the fact that the sort of American style of teaching conducting is very different than the Russian style and very different than what's taught in Japan. And one of the reasons I wrote my second book, Baton Basics, was trying to help conductors kind of come to terms with all the different types of technique that are out there, and to understand that every single technique that you may be taught from the different teachers you work with has a purpose, but it's understanding when to use what. And I think one of the challenges thing when you're younger and you're studying is, I would ping pong from one technique to the next technique to the next, always going to the extreme, and figuring out how to balance all of that. But I loved working with the different conductors, because they bring different things to you. Michael Tilson Thomas is a genius with programming. I mean, really made me start thinking totally different about how I combine pieces together and what makes an interesting concert. And Gustav Meyer was so much about the sound. And I worked with Korchmar in Europe at the Mariinsky Theater. And he was very much, I learned from him all about the Russian style of holding the sound in your hand and never letting it go. And so I wanted to figure out a way with my second book to help people understand that and help them develop a technique and a variety of gestures so that they would be more effective in communicating not just meter or not just time, but quality of sound and emotion and articulation.
It's amazing how long it takes to get a fluid gesture vocabulary, isn't it? How learning the basics is, takes time, but then to apply them, you have to be out there in a variety of situations to really get to expand your vocabulary, I guess.
Yeah, because you give a gesture and something's going to come back, but it doesn't always come back the way you think it's going to come back. And so it's learning how to adjust in the moment, even to different groups, how they respond to your gestures. And, one of the reasons I wanted to be a conductor was I felt that I would never be able to master it. It would be a lifelong learning. And it is so true, because there's so much to learn always, and you're always learning and growing and changing and adapting. There's always more music to learn. There's more psychology of how to work and motivate people to learn. There's your hands and the gestures and the training of your body to learn. And so I figured this would be a lifelong quest.
It's certainly wonderful to see how you've taken that quest and you've grown with it, and you've done such interesting things. You've won many awards for your innovative programming. What's your philosophy of programming concerts? Do you have a kind of philosophy on how you put these together?
I do have a philosophy, but it's also of I have to program concerts that I would be interested in going to. And I have a short attention span in some ways, and I like variety. And so, the standard, okay, overture, concerto, symphony, that can work, but I find those a little bit staid, and I'm known for adding lighting and actors and dancers and unusual things, because I like things to have what is called a purple cow. So there's a marketing expert, Seth Godin, that wrote the Purple Cow book, which I recommend everyone to get and read. It's like a little children's book, um, but it talks about the philosophy that if you're driving down a highway and you see a brown cow, you're not going to notice. But if you see a purple cow, not only will you notice, but you may even like stop, pull off the road, text someone, call someone, spread the word. And so I try to, with my concerts, incorporate concepts of the purple cow with unusual things happening, either during the concert or it may be before the concert or after the concert. And sometimes I go with crazy ideas. In Allentown, we had a concert. The theme was blue. We did Jennifer Higdon's Blue Cathedral. We did Michael Torke's bright blue music. We did the Blue Danube. I mean, it's a wild idea, but we encouraged the audience to wear blue and the orchestra wear blue.
That's fun.
And it was just fun. It was just, yeah, let's make concerts fun and interesting. Another time I was doing an Irish concert. I had an Irish piece because it was on St. Patrick's Day, and I didn't tell anybody, but I had Irish step dancers that suddenly just showed up, and they danced in, they danced out. And I started with one, and they just danced like a 16-bar passage and danced off. And then later on, and you could hear the ripple in the audience, because like, whoa, what was that? And then later on, I had two come on, and then now they're going, well, how many dancers are back there? And you have them. You have that audience in the palm of your hand, and you got to make it fun. You got to make it fun and interesting, and you got to make it passionate and powerful. And that's why we have live concerts. It's to create those moments.
I teach undergraduates, and I teach an introductory course to about 35 to 37 students, and many of them have never seen a classical concert, and I make them go to a concert. Pre-COVID, I made them go to a concert and attend and write it up, and that type of introduction to musical ideas. And it's just so interesting to people's conceptions of music. They think everything, this is going to be boring, and I show them what it's like to see something, to see a virtuoso play an instrument, and by the end they're shocked by how interesting it can be, especially when you add visual elements as well.
Yeah.
And we have to do that.
Exactly. And all of our concerts, the way we put them together, like I did a concert where I mixed Piazzolla's Four Seasons of Buenos Aires with Vivaldi, but I actually interspersed them alternating so that it was done in a way where we didn't even do all of them, but they merged in a way. And another concert where we kind of merged David Diamond's, he has a Shakespeare Romeo and Juliet piece, and we actually alternated it with Prokofiev's Romeo and Juliet and their style. And what was interesting is the audience started listening and comparing and contrasting the two composers, as we did sometimes the same titled section, but by two different composers back to back.
How important?
And so I love to get the audience engaged.
That's really great. Yeah, it's always tricky when we're back and forth. There's a slight delay in the communication, but don't worry. Just when you have an idea, just keep on going. How important is it to you that you program 20th century and living composers?
Yeah, I love doing living composers, and I always try to get them there in person to the concert. Or if I can't get them there in person, I was doing a piece by Lowell Lieberman. I went to New York. Lowell and I are friends. I just went to New York with a video camera and filmed him, and then we showed that at the concert. Anytime you can make things more personal, I think is very, very important. And I love new music. In fact, we have this new composer in residence in Allentown, and we're also starting a new chamber music series of new music. And we have call for scores so that these will be featuring composers from throughout our region, as well as other composers. But the deal is the composers have to be there when their piece is premiered, and they have to introduce it. And we want to know what their thought process is. What are they trying to communicate? What does this music say to them? I think that's very, very important in people understanding new music. But new music is our future because it's the only thing you can't get on YouTube and the
Good
internet.
point.
You know, it's where you have to go live to hear it. You know,
And it's
and I always think, what if you had a chance to hear? Go ahead.
so we can't ask Beethoven why he chose this idea at the beginning of the Seventh Symphony, but we can ask a living composer why they orchestrate it this way. What was their motivation? And I just love those conversations.
Yeah, yeah. And it just makes it real. And the other thing for supporting new music is the fact that if we want to have any of music from our era live for the next 100, 200, 300 years, it has to be written. A composer has to be paid to write a piece in order for us to have anything that lives in our era. It's very important.
Critically important. And it's so important. I deal with this with opera all the time, is that it becomes like a museum piece that you take out and look at and put back on the shelf, and I'm like, that's not how it was intended to be. This is entertainment that people went to the opera house, took off their boots, went in there and sat down, and it's like it was the sitcoms, it was the entertainment and the art of its day. And it's so easy for music to be relegated, classical music to be relegated as this pristine museum piece. But I think it's so important that we demystify it and bring it to the public.
Yeah. And I think all of if you talk to any conductor across the United States, I think everyone is trying to figure out ways of doing that. And here's where COVID actually has really helped. It's been frustrating, but COVID has forced all of us to reach our audiences in a different way, in a way that is on a TV, which then makes access more available to people. So it's taken away the barriers. Sometimes the barrier is cost. Sometimes the barrier is they're not comfortable coming to the concert hall. They feel trapped sitting in where they can't move, they can't get out. And so by taking away the barriers, we are able to reach more people. And I think more people are going to now, hopefully, when we're able to do live concerts, come back to the concert hall so that they can now hear it live and experience it in that way where the energy in the room is tangible. That's what's so special about the live performances.
Yeah, we certainly miss the thrill of having audience there and artists in front of us. And so describe the projects you've been working on with Allentown particularly. What have you been doing in the COVID period to keep your orchestra and your community engaged?
Yeah, so we started out with doing a lot of Zoom interviews. And so my goal was to work through, past guest artists. We were airing videos of past concerts. I think everybody started at this point. So each of those videos was accompanied by a interview video. So it was really fun. I got to hook back up with all the guest artists. So we worked through that and then realized that we needed to do more. And we started looking, we had to, of course, cancel our full season that we had planned, redo the season. And the planning was quite intensive because I was a little bit too optimistic. And so in May, I'm planning that we could do chamber orchestra concerts starting in September. Not the big orchestra, but I thought, well, I could put 30 people on a stage. And,
Haydn, Mozart.
We got the stage, we put the chairs out. Yeah. And so I reprogrammed everything for that size. And then as we got closer, it's like, no, this is not going to happen. So then we shifted to a quintet of strings. So each concert, then I programmed both a chamber orchestra version and a chamber music version. And I programmed them in a way that the soloists, we decided to feature members of our orchestra as soloists. So the solo piece was a piece for just strings, so that even if we had to shift back to a string quintet, we could keep our soloists so that, if somebody's gone to all the work to learn the piece, they're ready for it, they're excited about it, we don't have to just cancel it, we can keep going. And so that's been the way we've done. We're hoping, we were going to go to chamber orchestra in February. That got pushed back. We're now still chamber music. We're now hoping that by April we'll be at chamber orchestra. But I have an alternate chamber music program if we're not there yet. But the important thing is that we've filmed these concerts. We have them available. They're free for our subscribers. They're on demand at $15 to watch it, which is a bargain. And we're reaching a lot of people that we didn't reach before.
How can we see those? How can we see those programs? I'm sorry. How can people see those?
Yeah,
programs?
So you can go to. They can go to millersymphonyhall.org, which is the website for the Allentown Symphony. You can also just type in Allentown Symphony, you'll find the website. And then on that website, there's a tab that says Miller Symphony Hall at Home. It may say MSH at Home, which takes you to another website that we developed just for COVID, which has all of these films. And it's just, you click on it. It's a $15 fee. If you're a subscriber, it's free. And basically all of the concerts are about an hour and 15 minutes long. Our holiday concert was just an hour. In fact, we're going to, I think, end the show today with a little clip from our recent holiday concert. And what I'm learning is, when we put these concerts together, it's like scripting a TV show as opposed to a regular concert. So we have, on the holiday concert, we have a narrator. Coming up, we've got a family concert that we'll be doing, and that has a narrator and is scripted. We're having orchestra members introduce pieces, which I think is really great. So we actually had a public speaking session we offered for our entire orchestra, which I think people really enjoyed. It was fun because actually we all tried to do the worst pitch possible. That was the starting point, so that we could only go up from there.
It's amazing what everyone's had to learn during this period.
But anyway, so yeah. We're trying to get our orchestra members, helping out and talking with our El Sistema students. We have a program that we've kept going with that all online, and trying to interact with our donors. I've done many sort of talking cocktail calls with donors. Same with our chorus. Our chorus has not rehearsed at all, but we've had 2 sessions just getting them together to stay in touch, talk about what they want to do, keep everybody engaged.
That's a big part of it these days is engaging communities and keeping communities together, because it can be so disheartening when we're used to having these organizations and these ensembles, and all of a sudden they just grind to a halt. And it's really important, especially for the singing communities as well, for avocational singers, church, temple. I mean, all these places where music's made, it's really taking a hit, and it's really important that we keep people engaged as much as possible.
Yeah, I think the singing community is the hardest, because it will be longer until we can get them back. And anyone who's sung in a chorus, how that music just it fills your heart and soul. And the reason people sing is because they need that in their life. And it's very different singing in your house in front of a camera than going to your rehearsal and having that camaraderie with all your friends and really being in the center of the music making. So
how has COVID tested you? You said how many times you had to redo your program. I did 4 different seasons for my summer job at Ocean Grove based on if we can have small chorus or distanced chorus or no chorus. It's amazing how many times we've had to do the same program. And how has that tested you as an artist?
Well, I think it's challenged me in many ways. One is just patience of doing it again and doing it again. And it's, you also have to do all the costs and all, it's not just the program, it's the whole picture. And then you have to deal with the logistics of, surveys for the orchestra. Are they willing to play? Who doesn't want to play, and why? And what sorts of COVID protections that we need to do. So I think it's made us all grow. The other ways I feel I've really been forced to grow is doing more things on the internet, doing these videos. I was always a radio person. I always loved doing radio, but I hated doing TV and film, and I'm getting way more comfortable now on TV and film because we have to. Learning how to do that, what's appropriate. Yeah, and even just the technology of how to make it happen is important. So those are all skills. The other thing is that I immediately started looking at different types of repertoire, because these concerts, Allentown Symphony and even Garden State Philharmonic, where I conduct, are mostly full orchestra ensembles. And so delving into repertoire that can be just with strings, or that can be done with 32 players. 32 was the number we figured out measuring that we could fit on our stage. And so everything would have to fit within that. And then, of course, the whole movement towards, diversity, and what other types of pieces by ethnic composers I can involve, what pieces by women composers I could involve, because suddenly I'm rethinking everything that we've ever done. And it was really great. And I'm going to keep working in those areas, because I discovered a lot of really great repertoire, and I started making some lists and looking mostly for chamber orchestra, but now I want to expand that. My list involve full symphony pieces also. So I think this is happening all over the country. How do we do the same but with fewer numbers of players?
And how were you able to accomplish them? What were some of the protocols that you employed in doing the recordings? I've had some guests on before. We had Jim Neglia from the Jacksonville Symphony, and they're doing a full season, of course, with the protocols and with barriers between them. And it's amazing how different organizations are adapting the protocols, or they're very different throughout the country, how people are approaching this.
Yes, and what we did is we actually gathered protocols. We worked through the League of American Orchestras. We worked through different other organizations across the country. And so we gathered probably about 20 protocols and studied them, and then came up with ours, worked through our orchestra committee to get these approved. So we have built, we actually aren't using plexiglass. So this may be a novelty. For a couple reasons. One, plexiglass is very expensive, but that wasn't the deciding factor. The deciding factor was plexiglass pushes the sound back at the person and doesn't really allow the sound out. And so it's very difficult to work with in a musical situation. So our stage crew came up with an idea to use the shrink wrap for windows. In the Northeast, this is sold in the winter. And it's big plastic sheets that you heat with a hairdryer, and you stretch it over a wooden frame. And so what we have is a plastic barrier that allows sound to come through. And so they have built 5 or 6 of these that are in pieces that come apart. And so this is what we use on our stage when we have wind players playing. We also have, we call it like the diaper, but we have this sort of pad that we put down for brass players to capture the moisture that comes out of their instruments. And then during concerts, we give them a nicer looking towel, because we figured the diaper doesn't look very good. So we also are separating our musicians backstage. We have separate rooms for them. We don't allow any socializing. We normally would serve coffee. We don't have any coffee, unfortunately. But we try, and we have HEPA filters on, air circulators that we run during the rehearsals. So we have a whole list of things that we do to try to make everybody feel totally safe during this.
BYOC. That sounds like a good. Everyone brings their own, and we'll get through this together. Have the musicians been? I'm sure the musicians are so they're all so much looking forward to getting together in any way. I find, but the safety being maintained is so important. And bravo, and to you and the orchestra for this is such hard work putting these things together, and congratulations for making that happen.
Thank you. And I will say that, we just did a brass concert, a holiday brass concert. My trombone player came in, and, this was his first concert that he had played since March. And it's just heartbreaking to hear this, because this is pretty much the norm is that, all of these amazing players don't have any work right now. They're sitting at home. They might be teaching online, but they have no active playing work, except for just a few instances of these types of live stream concerts.
Virtual concerts, if you hear it there, spotty. Yeah, we had I had a couple of the Met Orchestra players on, and they both discussed that we're going to lose a generation of players. Like there's the older players, some have retired from the Metropolitan Orchestra, and it's going to be a different landscape when we come back. What do you think about that?
I think that's true, and I feel very sorry for the ones that just graduated, because it's so hard to make a living as a musician, and most of us are motivated by competition and by people around us, and you take away that motivation, it's hard to be motivated to practice. It's hard, and if you're not top of your game, you cannot win an orchestral audition. And so if a player got out of school, they're not online taking courses or anything, they're just at home, real hard to stay top of your game. And yet when we come out of this, they're going to be wanting to take those auditions, and yes, everybody's going to be behind.
Yeah. What are you hearing from the largest organizations? When are people saying that the music may go back to a semblance of what it used to be?
I think all of us are hoping that it will come back to the level it was, but I think realistically, we may have to gear up to it. I think, fundraising because of COVID money and extra money is going usually well. We've noticed, at least in Allentown, that people are increasing their gifts because they understand the need at this time, and we are very, very grateful for that. But I'm worried about once we kind of come out of COVID and everybody says, okay, everything's fine now, it may not be fine. It may need that we still need another year of nurturing to come back, because right now our expenses are nowhere near what they were before COVID, because we're not doing any big concerts. We're doing only chamber music concerts. And so those are much more affordable to produce. But in order to come back to our full level, we're going to have to really ramp up the fundraising, and everyone's going to be suffering because everybody's had to take cuts during this time period. And all the musicians, many of them are on unemployment and trying to figure out how to get through this, and it's a challenging time. It's a challenging time.
It certainly is.
But the only thing we can do is stay positive. Yeah.
Yeah, the positive. I think just speaking to you, you're one of the most positive people I know. You're out there. You're going to produce. You're going to make interesting programming, and you're going to bring as much integrity as you can to any repertoire size or program, and that comes through so clearly and is appreciated. It's going to be quite a year. In the next 2 years, we're going to see as things start to emerge. On the union side of things, we're hearing such drastic things from New York City. I'm hearing from the Metropolitan Opera is very public these days. They just hired a European orchestra for one of their gala recordings, and it was all over the news, and especially on social media with the musicians. And it's going to be interesting to see the longer term effects we're going to see as we come out of this, and where it's going to hit the arts.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that's been good is that because we went from zero to everything having to be online, the union, did some side letters, really worked with the orchestras to help us figure out how to put things up online. And there's a cost involved, but what I'm really happy about is that the administration and the boards of the orchestras are understanding that there's a cost involved in putting it online, but the benefit to putting things online is huge. And so going forward, I'm hoping that we will be doing both, that we'll continue to do things online, and that we'll also continue to do things in the concert hall. And so this sort of difference of this means flexibility from the musicians union. Everybody has become more flexible to figure out how to enable us to really get into this century, like all the other art forms, which means being active presence online. Before this, at least in the Allentown Symphony, we didn't have anything online, nothing, because we weren't allowed to without paying huge fees. So now we're beginning to build those fees into our cost of doing business and our concept of what we want to look like going forward.
And that's so important. You can promote, the orchestra and what the orchestra's doing. You can have that promotion there all the time, so you can use. I mean, the video is so important, and that's going to be. I think that's one of the silver linings is the everyone's learning how to adapt to technology and include that in their programming, and I think that's gonna be with us moving forward forever.
Yeah, another interesting thing that's come out of this, and I'm actually going to be reaching out to some musicians I know because I want to find out how many are dabbling in this. But I think the musicians are really broadening their skill sets. I've had people call and say, yeah, I taught myself how to do video editing. I had one of our viola players actually is writing songs and he's recording them and he's singing all the different parts and playing and doing the accompaniment and then doing the visuals and creating his own music videos. And I think this is really cool, that it's also giving them time and inspiration to expand what they do as an art form and as a musician.
Well,
whereas many of them before, it's like, okay, I show up, I play my part, I go home.
Creative people are going to create. If it's not in one direction, their creativity will go and start to find new avenues. And I'm amazed just by doing this show what the different solutions my colleagues have found, and so incredibly different. But with such overwhelming obstacles, they come up with such interesting ideas, and that's been a really an eye-opening for me and really educational.
Yeah. And I think it's going to continue,
Hopefully we'll get ourselves back and working and people back in the concert halls sooner than later. What advice do you have for young people coming up in the music field now? What advice would you have to give as a person who's been in the business for a while now?
Yeah, so one of the things I didn't realize when I was younger growing up is really how small the music industry is, and that the people that you go to summer camp with that are good musicians there are going to be good musicians always. And if they stay in the field, you're going to run into them again and again and again. And that violinist that you sat next to may actually become an artist manager, or they may become the executive director of an orchestra. They may change their role. They may go into radio and run a radio station. But these are people you will meet again. And I don't think I really understood that fully when I was growing up, just how small the industry is. And so I would say meet as many people as you can and stay in touch with those people. You're investing in your future for a lifetime. So it's not where you stay in touch for a year, and if they can't do something from you, you drop them. It's just be a colleague, be a friend, keep in touch, and at some point know that your path will definitely cross again, and that people help each other up in this industry, and you need people to help you. The other thing I would say is persistence is really, really important. So you can have all the talent in the world, but if you're not persistent about practicing, about staying in the industry, about continually trying when you get rejected. There was a story of a horn player, and he was on, I think, his 30th audition, and he finally just said, oh, I'm going to quit, but I'll take one more. And that was an audition for the Boston Symphony, and got in, 30th, so, as a conductor, the conductors, I think, have one of the largest sort of reject, in the industry. We get rejected a lot, right? And so you got to have a really thick skin, and you have to also know why you are doing this. If you are not absolutely passionate about music making and feel that it is important to do that every single day of your life, if you're not that passionate, you should go do something else, because you can make a lot more money, have a lot less stress, in another job, right? But if you're a person that you feel passionate about performing your music, sharing music, being a part of this world, there is a place for everyone as long as you're willing to work really hard and that you don't give up. You just, because you have to stay in the game, you have to stay standing. It's always last man standing. And you have to keep improving. So it's not where every single day you have to work on something to make you better. And if you look at life like that and you set your goals, it's one brick at a time, the wall is built. But you got to lay the first brick, and you got to lay the second brick and the third brick.
Follow the yellow brick road, that is for sure. Excellent advice and sage advice from one of America's leading conductors. Diane, how can we find out more about you and your work and your various activities?
Yeah, so I do a website. It's just my name, DianeWittry.com. I'm lucky I'm the only person that I know of with that name. And so if you Google me, all you get is me, which is great. I'm glad my name is not like John Smith or something, or Paul Phillips. And there were 2 Paul Phillips that were conductors. Also, I'm active on Facebook and LinkedIn, and getting into Twitter a little bit more. So I'm trying to do the social media stuff. I'm pretty easy to find, and I do try to get back to people. I'm passionate about helping people, mentoring people, as you know, from my book, Beyond the Baton, that was written to really help develop better artistic leaders throughout the country. My Baton Basic books was to help people develop better technique for conducting. So I'm a person, I like to help people. So, please feel free to reach out to me. You can also Google the Allentown Symphony, come to concerts there, or the Garden State Philharmonic. They both have websites, and you can find me there. I'm also teaching a bunch of workshops. So even during COVID, I'm teaching a workshop next week with it's the Pacific Northwest Conductors Institute. So it will be on Pacific time, but it will be a Friday, Saturday, Sunday workshop. We're working on Siegfried Idle and Debussy Afternoon of a Faun and Jesse Montgomery's Starburst, which would be great fun. And so I'm pretty easy to find and try to teach quite a few workshops so I can get out there and help people.
Well, thank you so much, Dan. It's been great to spend time with you again, and continued success in all you do, both now and when life opens back up and you're traveling all over the world. And I look forward to being in touch.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us on Music Matters. And remember, subscribe to us on YouTube and hit that bell icon for the most up-to-date information. We have 2 guests this weekend. We've got a drummer playing all over the world, Mr. Taylor Simpson, on Saturday at 6 o'clock. And on Sunday, we have international mezzo-soprano Janara Kellerman, opera singer and a dear friend. So be sure to check those out. Thank you so much for your time. And remember, keep music alive. Good night.